Our top story, the French President Emmanuel Macron has warned against new imperialism in the Pacific during a landmark visit to the region, denouncing actions by big powers on his visit to Vanuatu. Macron has said actions were threatening the sovereignty of smaller states. China, US, Australia and several other nations have strategic and geopolitical interests in the region. Remember, France, which has island territories spanning the Indo-Pacific, has recently boosted ties in the region as well.
Zone économique exclusive.
First of all, there is the predation of the major powers. Foreign ships fish illegally in the exclusive economic zones. Numerous loans with lenient conditions are literally strangling development in the region. Commercial practices are being increasingly distorted. Interference is multiplying, and new imperialisms are emerging in the Indo-Pacific, particularly in Oceania. And the logic of power is threatening the sovereignty of many states, the smallest and often the most fragile.
Well, located between US, China and Australia, the Pacific Islands, island countries hold strategic importance for security and defense. While the US has long maintained influence and a military presence in the region, China has been a major infrastructure lender to the Pacific Islands, including Vanuatu. As the US and its allies seek to counter China's growing sway in the region, the US has stepped up Coast Guard patrols and surveillance, even though it maintains that it is seeking no permanent base in the region.
And I just want to be clear that we're not seeking permanent basing in PNG. This is a fundamental, foundational framework to deepen that defense relationship that, again, goes back decades. The common values that we have, I think, are really, really important. And this is an opportunity to expand upon a long-standing relationship that's been strong throughout.
Now, the most strategically important stop for Macron is in Papua New Guinea today, which has seen growing Chinese influence and signed a new security cooperation pact with the US in May. Macron's visit comes days after US Secretary of State Lloyd Austin's visit and underscores the French president's efforts to highlight the importance of France in the region that has seen the US and China compete for economic, military and diplomatic influence. The competition with China has escalated American efforts to increase security cooperation with Papua New Guinea. The US has been seeking to deter Pacific Island nations from forming security ties with China, a rising concern amid tensions over Taiwan and after Beijing signed a security pact with the Solomon Islands as well. Meanwhile, in a dramatic incident that puts the focus back on the islands in the Indo-Pacific region, Fiji's Prime Minister says that he was forced to cancel an official visit to China after hurting himself. The sudden pull-out by the leader has raised speculations that this was an attempt to distance his country from China. Meanwhile, President Emmanuel Macron's trip to Papua New Guinea and other areas in the Pacific Island states starting Monday comes as French forces have taken part in massive US-Australian-led military exercises in the region as well. And for more on this, we're now being joined by our correspondent Ross Cullen from Paris. And Ross, thank you very much for talking to us. Now, Macron's office insists the trip is not aimed at pressing an anti-China policy, but at encouraging regional powers to diversify their partnerships beyond Beijing and even Washington. But what is the real messaging of this visit as Western powers battle it out in the Pacific?
Well, President Emmanuel Macron made his first stop in New Caledonia earlier this week, which is a French overseas territory, so a domestic trip as far as the French president was concerned, to speak to people on the island, particularly about their independence referendums. There have been 3 in the last 5 years. All of them they have failed. The independence votes, people on New Caledonia and its surrounding islands choosing to stay part of France. After that, his trip has taken him to Vanuatu, and this is where he's made some remarks which have been picked up because he didn't mention China by name, but certainly believed that his comments were targeted at Beijing, saying that there is a new imperialism in the region, saying also that we stand shoulder to shoulder with Pacific states. There is a power logic Emmanuel Macron said, threatening the sovereignty of many states, the smallest and often the most fragile ones. He also did say that we will be aware that the US is becoming more and more present in the Pacific, China becoming stronger and stronger in the Pacific as well, wanting to clamp down, Emmanuel Macron said, and the US Coast Guard has also said this, on foreign ships which are fishing illegally in other countries' waters. China definitely is the target of these comments, but Emmanuel Macron was in China himself physically in April for meetings face-to-face with Xi Jinping, and so he won't be wanting to come out publicly and say that unilaterally this is France's changing position, but overall he understands the changing power dynamic in the Pacific Ocean, particularly with Washington and Beijing. France, as Emmanuel Macron has said, is a domestic power in the Indo-Pacific with 1.5 million citizens in the Indian and in the Pacific Oceans. So he does see it as an area where France is going to try to project influence, French and therefore by default also European influence being projected into those two regions. And so these comments are not totally divergent from positions that he and the French government have held in the past, but certainly, although he hasn't mentioned China by name, we can understand that that message will be targeted particularly at Beijing.
Right, Ross Cullen, thanks very much. Appreciate you joining us this evening with the latest details on that messaging by the French president on his first visit to the Pacific Islands. Important statements there coming, and as Ross said, hinted at the Chinese influence. Thanks for that.